When I attended wife's sister engagement party, my name tag said housekeeper. My wife's mother smirked. You're just a servant here. Worse, I had no meal. My wife giggled. Food is for a real family. I stood up, took off my ring, and said, then I'm leaving. My wife turned pale. Wait. The alarm on my phone buzzes at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before I actually need to get up, because apparently I'm the kind of masochist who enjoys those extra moments of consciousness before facing another day in this beautiful, backstabbing world of venture capital and family dysfunction. I'm Marcus Hale, 36 years old, and if you're keeping score at home, which my mother-in-law definitely is, I'm technically a success story. Attorney turned founder, law school graduate turned CEO, the American dream wrapped in a Tom Ford suit and served with a side of existential dread. 5 years I spent at Morrison, Klein & Associates, one of those midtown law firms where the marble floors cost more than most people's houses and the partners treat associates like particularly expensive coffee makers. I handled litigation that would make your head spin, hostile takeovers dressed up as strategic partnerships, contract disputes that read like Shakespearean tragedies, and compliance nightmares that kept federal investigators busy for months. The hours were brutal, the clients were sociopaths, and the billable rate was obscene. In other words, it was exactly what my parents expected when they watched me graduate from Columbia Law with honors and a soul-crushing amount of student debt. But here's the thing about being really good at reading the fine print. You start to see the loopholes in your own life. After 5 years of watching tech startups get eaten alive by their own legal documentation, I had an epiphany. Not the spiritual kind, mind you, but the profitable kind. What if there was a way to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to scan legal agreements before they became litigation landmines? What if compliance could be automated, risk could be quantified, and due diligence could happen in real time instead of after the federal investigators showed up with warrants? That's how LexSite was born. We're a legal tech SaaS platform that's basically like having a team of paranoid attorneys living inside your computer, except they work 24/7 and don't bill you $400 an hour for reading emails. Our AI engine can scan contracts faster than a speed-reading law student on Adderall, flagging everything from regulatory issues to potential securities fraud before it becomes a problem. We just closed our Series B funding round, $25 million from some very smart venture capitalists who understand that compliance software isn't sexy, but bankruptcy is even less sexy. Standing in front of the mirror in our Upper West Side penthouse, I adjust my Tom Ford tie and try to look like a man who hasn't spent the last 3 hours reviewing term sheets and acquisition proposals. The penthouse is Sophia's choice. Naturally, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the kind of place that screams, I made it, to anyone within a 50-mile radius. It's also the kind of place that costs more per month than most small accounting firms make in revenue. But who's counting? My phone buzzes with the morning's chaos. First up, an email from our board meeting agenda, because nothing says good morning like a reminder that 8 very wealthy people will be judging my quarterly performance later this week. The agenda items read like a financial thriller. Q3 revenue projections, potential acquisition targets, Series C planning, and something ominously labeled strategic restructuring opportunities. Translation: we're either about to make a lot of money or lose a lot of money, and the board wants to micromanage every decimal point. Next, a private equity outreach from Hamilton Strategic Partners, one of those firms that specializes in growth capital for disruptive legal technology platforms. Their email is 3 paragraphs of corporate speak that essentially boils down to, we heard you have money, we want some of it, let's do lunch. I forward it to Ronan Blake, our CFO, with a note. Thoughts? Also, remind me why we're not just buying an island instead. Ronan's already sent me his own morning briefing, a potential acquisition opportunity that has his risk management sensors pinging. There's a distressed document automation startup called DokaFlow AI that's hemorrhaging cash, but has some impressive intellectual property around contract analysis. They're basically us, but if we were run by people who thought sustainable growth was a type of organic farming. Their Series A investors are getting nervous, their engineering team is jumping ship, and their runway is shorter than a TechCrunch article about crypto regulation. In other words, It's the perfect acquisition target for a company with our track record and their desperation. Marcus, Ronan's email reads, DokaFlow's tech stack could integrate with our compliance platform within 6 months. Their client list includes 3 Fortune 500 companies and 2 federal agencies. Downside, they're about to default on their convertible notes. Upside, fire sale pricing. Recommendation, due diligence ASAP. Offer contingent on IP audit and key personnel retention. This is why I pay Ronan the big bucks. He can look at a failing startup and see either a golden acquisition or a cautionary tale, depending on the spreadsheet. His background is private equity and venture capital, the kind of guy who can calculate risk profiles in his sleep and probably dreams in IRR percentages. When we hired him as CFO, he came with references from 3 successful exits and a track record of turning distressed assets into profitable quarters. He's also the only person I know who can make a hostile takeover sound like a humanitarian mission. My phone buzzes again. Text from Sophia, don't be late to Bianca's engagement party tonight. Mom will be watching. You know how she gets about punctuality. Ah yes, Margot Whitmore, my beloved mother-in-law. If there's a Forbes list for passive-aggressive helicopter parenting, she's definitely in the top 10. Margot measures everything. Your income, your watch, your last name, the thread count of your sheets, probably the market cap of your company, and the premium on your life insurance policy. She's the kind of woman who can make a charity gala feel like a performance review. And tonight's engagement party for Sophia's sister Bianca is guaranteed to be a masterclass in social surveillance. The party's at some ridiculously expensive venue, probably the Grand Meridian Ballroom or something equally ostentatious, complete with crystal chandeliers and waitstaff who've been trained to serve canapes with the reverence typically reserved for religious artifacts. Bianca's marrying Julian Carter, a rising star at Montrose Capital who's been making waves in the venture capital world with his aggressive investment strategy and his habit of turning Series A rounds into Series B extensions through sheer force of networking. I grab my Tesla keys from the marble counter, because of course we have a marble counter. This is the Upper West Side, not some middle-class neighborhood where people use Formica like savages. The Tesla Model S hums to life in our private garage, and I spend exactly 30 seconds appreciating the fact that I can afford a car that costs more than most people's annual salary while simultaneously being environmentally conscious. It's the kind of cognitive dissonance that would make a philosophy professor weep, but it makes my accountant very happy. As I navigate through Manhattan traffic, I tell myself this evening will be simple. Show up, smile at the right people, make small talk about market positioning and product launches, maybe discuss the latest TechCrunch articles about AI regulation with some fellow founders. Shake hands with Julian's partners from Montrose Capital, nod appreciatively at whatever overpriced venue Margot has chosen, compliment Bianca's designer gown, and leave early enough to review tomorrow's board presentation. Easy, simple, no drama. Just another night in the life of a successful legal tech entrepreneur who definitely doesn't need his mother-in-law's approval, but will probably spend the entire evening trying to earn it anyway. Because that's what family is, right? A group of people who love you unconditionally while simultaneously keeping a detailed spreadsheet of all your personal and professional shortcomings. The city blurs past my window, and I can't shake the feeling that tonight is going to be one of those events that looks perfect on the surface but has some kind of compliance violation hiding in the fine print. But hey, that's what I do for a living. Find the problems before they find me. At least, that's the theory. The Grand Meridian Ballroom is exactly the kind of venue that makes you question humanity's priorities. $50,000 for one evening, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than a Tesla, and enough gold leaf on the walls to fund a small country's GDP. This is where Margot Whitmore has decided to celebrate her youngest daughter's engagement, because apparently the Four Seasons was too pedestrian, and anything less than museum-quality opulence would reflect poorly on the family's net worth. I pull up to the valet stand in my Tesla, and immediately 3 guys in bow ties descend like vultures at a private equity conference. The head valet, who's probably working his way through law school, poor bastard, gives my car an appreciative once-over. Beautiful machine, sir. The Model S Plaid. Just the regular S, I tell him, handing over the keys. I save the Plaid for board meetings where I need to intimidate venture capitalists. He laughs like I'm joking. I'm not entirely sure I am. The ballroom entrance is a masterclass in conspicuous consumption. There's a string quartet playing something that sounds vaguely classical and expensive, the kind of music that whispers, "We have culture and the portfolio to prove it." Waitstaff glide around in actual white gloves, not the latex kind you see at hospital compliance meetings, but the fancy cotton ones that scream, "We're too refined for fingerprints on the champagne flutes." I approach the check-in table, which is draped in what I assume is Italian silk and decorated with floral arrangements that probably required their own logistics coordinator. Behind the table sits a woman with the kind of smile that comes standard with event management degrees and anti-anxiety medication. "Good evening. Name, please." "Marcus Hale." She flips through a leather-bound folder that looks like it belongs in a law firm's conference room, scanning names with the efficiency of a paralegal reviewing discovery documents. Her manicured finger stops at my entry, and she pulls out a name badge with a practiced flourish. "Here you are, Mr. Hale." I take the badge and glance down at it, expecting to see the usual Marcus Hale, CEO, Lex site, or maybe just Marcus Hale, husband of Sophia. Instead, I'm staring at block letters that make my Harvard Law degree feel like a participation trophy. Marcus Hale, housekeeper. I blink. Read it again. The letters don't change. Still says housekeeper. Like I'm here to vacuum the marble floors and take out the trash, not celebrate my sister-in-law's engagement to a venture capitalist who probably makes less in a year than my company's AI platform processes in monthly recurring revenue. This is wrong, I say, holding up the badge like it's evidence in a securities fraud case. The check-in attendant looks confused. "Oh, let me double-check the list." She flips through her folder again, frowning. "No, that's what's listed here. Marcus Hale, housekeeper." Before I can process this information fully, before I can decide whether this is incompetence or malice, before I can channel my litigation training and demand to speak to whoever's in charge of this clusterfuck, Margot Whitmore materializes beside me like a bad quarterly earnings report. She's wearing lilac tonight, a color that somehow manages to look both expensive and condescending. Her jewelry catches the light from the crystal chandeliers, probably worth more than most people's 401k balances. She glances at my name badge with the kind of casual interest you'd show a mildly amusing TikTok video, and I watch her lips curve into what might generously be called a smile. "Oh, Marcus," she says, her voice carrying just enough volume for nearby guests to hear. "You're just a servant here." The words hit like a hostile takeover announcement. Clean, precise, devastating. I look around the ballroom, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. This isn't just a party, it's theater. And apparently, I'm not a guest, I'm the help. The guy who married into the family but will never really belong, no matter how many Series B rounds we close or how many times our legal tech platform gets featured in the Wall Street Journal's innovation section. Across the room, I spot Bianca Whitmore, soon to be Bianca Carter, laughing with her fiancé Julian near a champagne tower that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Julian's in his element, working the room like he's raising a new fund. He's got that venture capital swagger, the kind of confidence that comes from turning other people's ideas into your own equity positions. Julian's quite the catch, if you're into the type. Rising star at Montrose Capital, one of those white shoe VC firms that specializes in what they call disruptive growth opportunities and what everyone else calls buying companies, firing half the employees, and selling the pieces for parts. Word around Silicon Valley is that he's spearheading their new Series B crossover fund, basically a way to double dip in promising startups by getting in early and then leading their next funding round. Montrose Capital has serious clout in the investment world. They've got LPs that include pension funds, university endowments, and at least 3 sovereign wealth funds. Their track record includes successful exits from 2 unicorn startups and 1 spectacular failure that involved federal investigators and a very uncomfortable congressional hearing about overseas tax structures. Sophia appears at my elbow, and I can tell from her expression that she knows exactly what's happening here. Her laugh has that nervous quality that usually precedes really bad news, like when our compliance officer discovered a potential GDPR violation in our European client contracts. "Relax," she giggles, and it's the kind of laugh that doesn't reach her eyes. Food is for real family. Real family. The words hang in the air like the smell of insider trading. I watch as waiters begin setting down plates around our table. Artfully arranged appetizers that probably have names I can't pronounce and ingredients that were flown in from farms that specialize in sustainable luxury. Everyone gets a plate. Everyone except me. A clean white space sits in front of me like a gap in a contract where someone forgot to include the liability clause. The absence is more noticeable than the presence. A perfectly empty circle of bone china that might as well have "not worthy" engraved around the rim. A few guests at nearby tables begin to notice. I catch sideways glances, whispered conversations, the kind of social surveillance that happens at events where everyone's calculating everyone else's net worth and family tree position. Someone at the table behind us whispers something about upgrading your status, and the laughter that follows has sharp edges. Helena and Richard Montrose, Julian senior partners and the power behind Montrose Capital's billion-dollar fund, are seated at the head table with perfect sight lines to our little drama. Helena is wearing what I guess is a custom Armani gown, and her jewelry could probably fund a Series A round. Richard's in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that screams, "I own things you've never heard of." They're watching this unfold with the detached interest of investors evaluating a pitch deck. Helena leans over to whisper something to Richard, and he nods with the kind of expression that suggests they're taking notes for future reference. Julian catches my eye from across the room and gives me a wave that's just a little too enthusiastic, like he's overcompensating for something. His smile is the kind you see in Forbes profiles of 40 under 40 lists. Perfect teeth, perfect confidence, perfect awareness that everyone in the room knows his company just raised their latest fund at a $2 billion valuation. I feel the old courtroom stillness settle in my bones. It's the same feeling I used to get during depositions when opposing counsel thought they'd cornered me with some brilliant legal maneuver right before I destroy their case with a contract clause they'd overlooked. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you options. When people think you're just the help, they don't bother watching what you're actually doing with your hands. There's a moment in every hostile takeover when the target company realizes they've been outmaneuvered. It's not when the lawyers show up with acquisition papers or when the board meeting gets called for an emergency vote. It's earlier, that crystalline instant when you understand that everything you thought was solid ground is actually just a house of cards built on someone else's table. I stand up. The movement is deliberate, controlled, the same way I used to rise in courtrooms when I was about to deliver closing arguments that would reshape someone's entire financial future. Around me, conversations continue. Discussions about private equity valuations and IPO timelines. Gossip about which startup founders are sleeping with their venture capital partners. Predictions about whether the Fed's latest moves will tank the tech sector or just make everyone more creative with their Series C term sheets. But I'm not listening to any of that noise anymore. I'm operating on a different frequency now, the one that kicks in when you realize you're not playing the game you thought you were playing. I slide off my wedding ring. It's a simple platinum band, nothing flashy. Not because I can't afford flashy, but because I thought subtle was more dignified. The kind of ring that whispers established wealth rather than screaming nouveau riche tech bro. Sophia and I picked it out together at Tiffany's, back when I still believed that marriage was a partnership instead of a performance art piece designed to showcase family hierarchies. The ring catches the light from the crystal chandeliers as I hold it up for a moment, then set it down on the marble table. It makes a small sound, not quite a clink, not quite a tap. More like the sound a gavel makes when it's deciding someone's fate, but quieter, more final. The sound cuts through the ambient noise like a compliance violation at a board meeting. Heads turn. Conversations pause mid-sentence. The string quartet hesitates on a note, as if they're suddenly unsure whether they should keep playing or wait for someone to tell them what song comes after a marriage implodes in public. Sophia's face drains of color faster than a startup's bank account after a failed product launch. Wait, Marcus. But I'm already moving, my litigation instincts kicking in. Never explain when you're winning. Never negotiate from weakness. Never give opposing counsel time to regroup and figure out their counterargument. Margot's voice cuts through the air with the precision of a securities fraud indictment. It's a joke. A joke. Right. The kind of joke that involves systematically humiliating someone at a family event while ensuring maximum social media exposure and reputational damage. The kind of joke that would make a really interesting case study in a business school ethics class. assuming anyone still teaches ethics in business school. The helpless laughter at nearby tables dies like a crypto portfolio in a bear market. Julian clears his throat and suddenly develops a fascinating interest in the marble floor patterns. His perfect venture capitalist composure cracks, just enough to show the nervous 20-something beneath all that Montrose capital swagger. Across the room, I catch the eyes of Helena and Richard Montrose, Julian's senior partners, and the real power behind their billion-dollar fund. Helena is wearing diamonds that could probably finance a decent Series A round, and her expression suggests she's calculating risk-reward ratios in real time. Richard's face has gone carefully neutral, the look of a man who's survived enough boardroom coups to recognize when someone's about to make a very expensive mistake. They look unimpressed. This is bad for Julian. Very bad. When your senior partners start questioning your judgment at family events, it raises questions about your judgment in general. Questions about whether you're ready for that promotion to managing partner. Questions about whether you can handle the fiduciary responsibility that comes with managing other people's pension funds and university endowments. Helena leans over to whisper something to Richard, and I can read their expressions like a term sheet. They're having the kind of conversation that happens when LPs start getting nervous about a fund manager's personal life bleeding into their professional decision-making. The kind of conversation that ends with someone getting quietly relocated to a consulting role while the firm conducts an internal review of their risk management protocols. Bianca looks mortified, which is probably the first genuine emotion I've seen from her all evening. She's standing next to her champagne tower in a designer gown that costs more than most people's cars, watching her engagement party turn into a case study in family dysfunction. Her fiancé is losing face with his business partners. Her mother is creating the kind of scene that gets whispered about at country club charity galas for years, and her future brother-in-law just basically told everyone to fuck off without actually saying the words. Happy engagement, Bianca. Hope the prenup covers reputational damage. I place the name tag beside the ring, the one that says Marcus Hale, housekeeper. Let it sit there like evidence in a deposition. Let everyone see exactly what kind of family they're dealing with, what kind of values they prioritize, what kind of people they really are when they think no one important is watching. I do not raise my voice. I do not plead. I do not explain or justify or negotiate. I just stand there for a moment, letting the silence do the work that 1,000 words couldn't accomplish. The Grand Meridian Ballroom suddenly feels different. All that gold leaf and crystal and Italian silk can't disguise the fact that we're witnessing something ugly. All those carefully cultivated social connections, all that networking and reputation management, all those strategic partnerships and family alliances, none of it matters when someone decides to stop pretending the emperor has clothes. Margot's face has gone rigid, like she's finally realized that her little power play might have consequences beyond making me squirm for her entertainment. She's calculating now, damage control, reputation management, how to spin this to minimize the impact on future business relationships. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? Business relationships. Everything's a transaction, everyone's a contact, every conversation is a potential investment opportunity. Sophia takes a step toward me, her hand reaching out like she's trying to stop a hostile takeover that's already gone through regulatory approval. But it's too late for that. You can't unring a bell, and you can't unhumiliate someone at their own family's party in front of their business partners and social network. Julian's face has gone pale beneath his perfectly applied foundation. He's probably running through scenarios in his head. Damage control with the Montrose partners, reputation management within the venture capital community, maybe even worst-case planning for what happens if this goes viral on LinkedIn or gets picked up by some gossip blog that covers New York's financial elite. The waiters have stopped moving. The string quartet has gone silent. Even the bartenders have paused mid-pour to watch this drama unfold. 300 of New York's most successful people are witnessing a real-time demonstration of what happens when someone decides they're done playing by rules that were designed to keep them in their place. I walk toward the exit under the crystal chandeliers, my footsteps echoing on marble that probably costs more per square foot than most people make in a month. I'm not storming out. That would be emotional, undignified, the kind of behavior that confirms you don't belong in polite society. Instead, I'm exiting like I'm leaving a courtroom I just won. The Tesla's interior feels like a sanctuary compared to the social warfare I just escaped. I sit in the driver's seat for exactly 30 seconds, letting the silence wash over me while the engine hums with that particular satisfaction that comes from German engineering and a clear conscience. Then I pull out my phone and call Ronan Blake, my CFO. We're executing the contingency plan. I tell him without preamble. Ronan doesn't ask questions. That's why I pay him the big bucks. He's got the kind of private equity background that means he's seen every possible variation of family drama intersecting with business interests. When we hired him away from his last fund, where he specialized in distressed asset acquisitions, I made it clear that working for a legal tech startup meant being prepared for all kinds of compliance issues, including the personal kind. Copy, he says, and I can hear him already pulling up the relevant files on his laptop. Which protocols? We spent 6 months building what we called the nuclear option financial framework, back when I first started noticing that my in-laws had some interesting ideas about money and boundaries. It wasn't paranoia, it was risk management. The same way our AI platform scans contracts for potential liability issues, I've been scanning my personal financial relationships for vulnerabilities that could turn into leverage points. First, I tell him, freeze all automatic transfers to Margot's accounts. This is the big one. After my father-in-law died, Richard Whitmore, who made his fortune in real estate development before dying of a heart attack at 58, Margot found herself in what she described as temporary financial distress. The estate was complicated, tied up in trusts and offshore accounts that would make a tax attorney weep. So I stepped in like the good son-in-law I thought I was, setting up monthly transfers to cover her living expenses while the probate lawyers sorted out the inheritance mess. Those transfers weren't small. We're talking about maintaining her lifestyle in a Southampton estate that probably costs more per month than most small businesses make in revenue. Property taxes, maintenance staff, the kind of ongoing expenses that come with owning what amounts to a private resort. I justified it as family obligation, the cost of keeping peace in a marriage, an investment in long-term relationship stability. But temporary was 2 years ago. The estate's been settled for 18 months. Margot's sitting on enough inherited assets to fund a Series A round. And apparently she's forgotten that my generosity came with an implicit understanding of mutual respect. Second, I continue. Revoke the Whitmore Black Card access tied to my family office. This one's going to sting. When Sophia and I got married, I added her family to my American Express Centurion account, the black card that comes with essentially unlimited credit and the kind of concierge service that can arrange private jet charters on 4 hours' notice. It seemed like a nice gesture at the time, a way to signal that I considered them real family, not just in-laws to be tolerated. Margot's been using it for everything from charity gala donations to furniture for her guest houses. Last month alone, she racked up $40,000 in charges, including a wine collection that probably required its own insurance policy. I never complained because the money wasn't the issue. It was about showing that I could provide for the family, that I understood the financial responsibilities that come with marrying into established wealth. But providing for family assumes you're actually considered family. Third, terminate the Upper West Side penthouse guest permissions. Margot has a habit of dropping by. Our building has the kind of security that would make a compliance officer proud, but I'd added Margot to the approved visitor list so she could access the penthouse when we were traveling for business. She's been treating it like her personal Manhattan pied a terra, hosting her charity committee meetings in our living room and using our kitchen for what she calls intimate dinner parties with her social circle. Last week I came home from a board meeting to find 12 women from her book club drinking wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent, discussing some novel about wealthy families destroying each other through passive-aggressive warfare. The irony was apparently lost on them. Fourth, notify Ava Chun. Trigger the post-nup clauses for public disparagement and reputational harm. Ava Chun is my outside litigation attorney, the kind of lawyer who makes opposing counsel wake up in cold sweats. She handles high-stakes commercial disputes, usually involving tech companies and venture capital firms. When Sophia and I signed our post-nuptial agreement, a document that would make a tax attorney weep with joy, Ava insisted on including provisions for reputational damage and public humiliation. At the time, Sophia laughed about it. Who would do that, she asked. We're family. Turns out the answer is, family would do that. Especially family that thinks business relationships are just another form of entertainment. The post-nup includes specific liquidated damages for actions that could harm my professional reputation or business relationships. Tonight's little performance at the Grand Meridian Ballroom definitely qualifies. Ava will file a separation agreement, inventory all assets, and place a standstill on any marital equity transfers. It's not about the money. It's about establishing that actions have consequences, even in marriage. Fifth, compliance note to HR. Restricts Sophia's access to internal communications. This one's delicate. Sophia isn't technically an employee of LexSite, but she's been advising one of our junior business development associates, supposedly offering insights into client relationship management. What she's actually been doing is using her access to our internal Slack channels to gather intelligence about our strategic plans, funding rounds, and client acquisitions. I discovered this last month when she casually mentioned details about our DokaFlow AI acquisition discussions that I'd only shared with the senior leadership team. When I asked how she knew, she claimed she was just trying to be supportive of my business interests. Spousal privilege is one thing. Industrial espionage disguised as marital support is something else entirely. Copy on all points, Ronan says. Also, heads up, Montrose Capital is courting our Series C as an anchor LP. I smile without humor, watching Manhattan traffic through the Tesla's windshield. Not anymore. This is the beautiful thing about having real power versus the illusion of power. Margot thinks power comes from social positioning and family connections. But real power comes from controlling systems that other people depend on, funding relationships, investment partnerships, the kind of financial infrastructure that makes or breaks careers in the venture capital world. Montrose Capital wants to lead our Series C funding round, which would give them significant influence over LexSite's strategic direction and potentially a board seat. Julian's been positioning himself as the relationship manager for that deal, probably hoping to use his family connection as social proof of due diligence. But family connections work both ways. If you can't manage your personal relationships professionally, how can LPs trust you to manage their pension funds? The switches I control aren't just financial. They're reputational, strategic, systemic. And I'm about to flip every single one of them. My family office isn't some flashy operation with glass walls and ping-pong tables like the tech startups featured in TechCrunch. It's a quiet LP, limited partner, position across several funds, the kind of diversified investment strategy that most people associate with university endowments and sovereign wealth funds. What most people don't realize is that being a quiet LP gives you influence that's inversely proportional to how much noise you make about it. I pull over at a Starbucks in Midtown and open my laptop. The Tesla's Wi-Fi connects automatically, and I'm logged into my secure investment platform within 30 seconds. Time to see exactly how many levers I actually control in this little ecosystem of venture capital incest that passes for New York's financial elite. First up, two general partners who've been courting me for their latest funds. Marcus Chun at Meridian Ventures and Sarah Rodriguez at Fifth Avenue Capital. Both firms specialize in growth stage investments, the kind of Series B and Series C rounds that can make or break a startup's trajectory toward IPO or acquisition. Both have been trying to increase their allocation from my family office for months. I compose identical texts to both, reevaluate Montrose Capital exposure, governance and ethics flags, risk assessment needed. I don't scream. I don't explain. I don't provide a detailed breakdown of how Julian Carter allowed his future mother-in-law to humiliate his fiancé's brother-in-law at a public engagement party. That would be emotional, unprofessional, the kind of behavior that gets you labeled as difficult to work with in LP feedback sessions. Instead, I frame it as due diligence, because that's exactly what it is. In the private equity and venture capital world, governance and ethics flags is code for this person's judgment is questionable and their personal life might create liability issues for our fund. It's the kind of language that makes general partners very, very nervous, especially when it comes from an LP who's been writing checks consistently for 3 years running. I open a new document and start drafting what we call a one-pager in the investment world, a concise summary of concerns that can be shared with other LPs without appearing to be a hit job. The key is to stick to observable facts and let other people draw their own conclusions about character and professional judgment. Confidential LP Memo. Montrose Capital Risk Assessment. Governance Concerns. Related party transactions involving family members of junior partners. Reputational risk from public conduct at industry events. Questions regarding professional judgment in client relationship management. Potential exposure to class action lawsuits from affected portfolio companies. Due diligence recommendations. Review all investments with Julian Carter as lead. Assess portfolio company satisfaction with relationship management. Evaluate impact on funds' overall risk profile. Consider concentration limits for junior partner decision-making authority. This memo reflects preliminary concerns and should not be construed as investment advice. It's beautiful in its clinical detachment. No emotion, no personal grievances, just the kind of risk management language that makes institutional investors sleep better at night. I save it to my encrypted drive and mark it for selective distribution to LPs in Montrose Capital's current fund. But that's just the appetizer. The main course involves Julian's own little vanity project. Cardinova is Julian's baby, an AI startup that's supposed to revolutionize contract analysis for mid-market law firms. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's basically a less sophisticated version of what Lexside has been doing for 3 years, except Julian's team thinks they can compete by focusing on price point rather than feature sets. Classic mistake of someone who's never actually built a tech company from the ground up. Cardinova is in the middle of a Series B extension round, trying to raise an additional $12 million to extend their runway and scale their engineering team. The lead fund is Apex Ventures, but their commitment is contingent on a side letter agreement where my anchor equity position unlocks the rest of the funding syndicate. Here's how these deals work. Big LPs like my family office often provide anchor investments that give smaller investors confidence to participate. It's like social proof for rich people. If Marcus Hale's family office is willing to write a 7-figure check, then this must be a solid investment opportunity. My participation triggers a cascade of smaller investments from angels, family offices, and strategic partners who want to co-invest alongside established money. Without my anchor position, Cardinova's Series B extension falls apart, which means Julian's startup runs out of money in approximately 4 months, assuming they don't find alternative funding sources or drastically cut their burn rate. I draft a formal notice to Apex Ventures. Dear team, after careful review of our due diligence materials for Cardinova's Series B extension, we are withdrawing our soft commitment pending further review of governance issues at the management level. Recent events have raised questions about the founding team's professional judgment and their ability to maintain the kind of client relationships essential for success in the legal technology sector. Given the competitive landscape and the importance of reputation management in B2B sales cycles, we believe these factors represent material risks to the investment thesis. We appreciate your consideration and look forward to evaluating future opportunities with your fund. Best regards, Marcus Hale, Managing Partner, Hale Family Office. It's polite, professional, and absolutely devastating. Julian's about to learn that there are consequences for letting your family treat your business partners like domestic staff. Meanwhile, at Lexside, I'm putting our own AI platform to work on something completely different. I task our machine learning engine to pull every clause containing morals, public disparagement, and reputational harm from our contract database. It's not revenge, it's research. I want to see exactly how comprehensive our post-nuptial agreement is compared to industry standards. The results are fascinating. Our AI identifies 47 different variations of morals clauses across commercial contracts, partnership agreements, and employment documents. The most sophisticated language comes from private equity fund agreements, where LPs specifically protect themselves against general partners who might create reputational risk through personal conduct. Our general counsel pings me on Slack. Your post-nup is ironclad. Ava Chin's work is basically a masterpiece of anticipatory risk management. Of course it is. When you're dealing with family money and marriage contracts, you don't hire second-tier legal talent. You hire the kind of attorneys who usually handle billion-dollar M&A transactions and securities compliance for Fortune 500 companies. The beauty of having real power is that you don't have to exercise it loudly. You just have to exercise it precisely. Every text I send, every investment I withdraw, every risk assessment I share. It's all calibrated to create maximum systemic impact with minimal personal exposure. Margot thinks power comes from controlling social situations and family hierarchies. But real power comes from controlling the financial systems that fund those social situations. She can humiliate me at one party. I can make sure her future son-in-law never gets invited to the kind of parties that matter for his career. The Tesla's navigation system chimes, arriving at destination. I'm home, but the real work is just beginning. I'm sitting in my Tesla in the parking garage beneath our Upper West Side building, engine off, watching the financial equivalent of a controlled demolition unfold in real time through my phone screen. It's 11:47 p.m., and the engagement party is still happening 40 blocks south. But thanks to the miracle of modern technology and social media addiction, I'm getting live updates from multiple sources. Ronan forwards me a screenshot from someone's Instagram story. It's a photo taken from inside the Grand Meridian Ballroom, and I can see Helena Montrose standing at what appears to be a small microphone setup near the Champagne Tower. The caption reads, "When family values meet business ethics, gemstone sparkles, #real recognizereal." But it's the next screenshot that makes me smile. Someone recorded Helena's actual words, and Ronan's transcribed them. "Richard and I want to congratulate Julian and Bianca on their engagement. Family is everything. And we believe that how people treat their family members reflects their character in all areas of life. We'll be pausing our public congratulations until we can better understand tonight's events." Translation: Montrose Capital is distancing themselves from Julian faster than a startup pivoting away from crypto after an SEC investigation. The string quartet has apparently stopped playing. According to a text from someone's cousin who works in event management, the musicians packed up their instruments 20 minutes ago after the general awkwardness became unbearable. Nothing kills the ambience of a $50,000 engagement party quite like watching the guest of honor's business partners publicly question his judgment. Ronan sends me another update. Caterers are asking if they should continue serving dinner. Half the guests left after the Montrose announcement. I can picture it perfectly. 300 of New York's financial elite, all dressed in designer gowns and Tom Ford tuxedos, suddenly realizing they're witnessing a career implosion in real time. The kind of people who attend charity galas and private equity conferences don't stick around for family drama. They have portfolios to protect and reputations to maintain. My phone buzzes with an encrypted message from an unknown number. It's Julian, texting from what's probably a burner phone app. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I screenshot it and forward it to Ava Chun with a note. Opposing party attempting direct contact despite legal representation. Please advise on protocol. Her response comes back in under 2 minutes. Do not respond. All communication goes through me now. Also, nice work tonight. Very professional. Meanwhile, Julian is apparently having a meltdown near the Champagne Tower. According to my source, one of the event photographers who's been discreetly documenting everything for what I assume will be a very expensive wedding album. Julian's been checking his phone compulsively for the past hour. His face gets a little paler each time he refreshes whatever app he's obsessing over. Probably his startup's funding pipeline dashboard. Cardanova's Series B extension just went from closing next week to catastrophic failure in the span of 3 hours. When you're a venture capitalist whose own company depends on other people's investment decisions, pissing off the wrong LP can end your career faster than a securities fraud conviction. My phone rings. Sophia's name appears on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then I let the next 3 calls go to voicemail. By the 4th call, I'm genuinely curious about what she could possibly say that would justify interrupting my evening of systematic reputation destruction. But I don't answer. Ronan taught me this during his private equity days. When you're executing a hostile takeover, you never take calls from the target company during market hours. It shows weakness, suggests you might be willing to negotiate from a position of strength. Better to let them sweat overnight and call back when you're ready to dictate terms. Instead, I get updates from the most unlikely source, Margot herself. She's been texting paragraphs about misunderstanding and branding optics, apparently unable to comprehend that tonight wasn't a branding problem. It was a character revelation. Her messages read like a crisis communication strategy gone wrong, all corporate speak and damage control language. Marcus, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about tonight's seating arrangements and dietary accommodations. From a brand positioning perspective, this kind of public relations incident could impact the Whitmore family's reputation management across multiple stakeholder groups. Perhaps we could arrange a private meeting to discuss strategic messaging alignment and explore solutions that protect everyone's professional interests while maintaining family unity and operational efficiency going forward. I reply exactly once. Counsel will communicate. Do not contact me directly. It's the kind of response that makes lawyers very happy and family members very nervous. In corporate terms, I've just escalated this from an internal matter to a legal proceeding, which means everything gets documented, every communication gets reviewed, and every future interaction happens under the supervision of people who bill $400 an hour to prevent exactly this kind of clusterfuck. But the real entertainment comes from a group chat I rarely read. One of those extended family threads that usually consists of birthday reminders and forwarded articles about tax law changes. Tonight, it's been buzzing with activity that reads like a real-time focus group of people trying to figure out which side of this mess they want to be on. Uncle Robert, Sophia's father's brother, owns 3 car dealerships in Connecticut. Why poke the bear who owns the picnic? Cousin Amanda works in investor relations for a pharmaceutical company. Maybe some people need to learn the difference between net worth and self-worth. Aunt Patricia, Margot's sister, married to a federal judge. Family money comes with family obligations. Both directions. Then Uncle Robert deletes his comment. But I've already taken a screenshot, because in the private equity world, you document everything. You never know when you'll need evidence that everyone knew exactly what was happening and chose sides accordingly. The most interesting development comes from an unexpected source, Bianca herself. She's apparently left her own engagement party and is currently sitting in the lobby of our building, according to the doorman who just called to ask if she should be allowed up. Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes. I tell him. This should be interesting. The bride-to-be wants to chat with the brother-in-law who just torched her fiancé's career prospects and turned her engagement party into a case study in family dysfunction. I grab my laptop and head for the elevator, curious to see what the other side of this family drama looks like when it's not performing for an audience of 300 venture capitalists and their wives. The next morning arrives with the kind of clarity that only comes after you've systematically destroyed your in-laws' financial ecosystem and slept soundly knowing you documented everything properly. I'm in my Lakeside office by 7 a.m., which puts me 2 hours ahead of most venture capitalists, but right on schedule for someone who's about to weaponize legal documentation like it's a Series A term sheet. Ava Chin arrives at 8:30 sharp with her paralegal, Rebecca Santos, and a rolling briefcase that probably contains enough contracts and compliance forms to make the Securities and Exchange Commission weep with joy. Ava's the kind of attorney who charges $800 an hour and earns every penny by treating family law like corporate litigation. Which, let's be honest, it basically is when you're dealing with this level of assets and reputational risk. Coffee, I offer, gesturing toward our office's espresso machine, which costs more than most people's monthly rent, but makes the kind of cappuccinos that help you think clearly about complex legal strategies. Already had 3 cups, Ava says, settling into the conference room chair like she's about to conduct a deposition. Let's review your post-nuptial agreement and discuss separation protocols. She spreads out documents on the marble conference table with the efficiency of someone who's handled enough high-net-worth divorces to know that prenups and postnups aren't romantic gestures. They're risk management instruments designed to prevent exactly the kind of financial chaos that happens when family members decide to wage war using other people's money. The postnup we signed 2 years ago is a masterpiece of anticipatory legal architecture. 47 pages of clauses covering everything from asset division to intellectual property rights, with specific provisions for reputational damage, public disparagement, and what legal scholars politely call conduct unbecoming a spouse. The mutual non-disparagement rider is particularly robust, Ava notes, flipping to page 32. Any public action designed to humiliate or diminish your professional reputation triggers liquidated damages of $250,000, plus attorney fees and costs. Last night's engagement party definitely qualifies. The housekeeper name tag, the withheld meal, The public humiliation in front of business partners and potential investors. It's textbook reputational harm, documented by approximately 50 Instagram stories and 3 professional photographers who were hired to capture Bianca's perfect evening. We'll file the separation agreement within 48 hours, Ava continues. Standard terms. Temporary division of assets, suspension of joint financial obligations, immediate implementation of the disparagement clauses. If they want to contest any provisions, they can explain their position to a family court judge who's probably handled enough Upper West Side divorce cases to have strong opinions about passive-aggressive in-laws. Rebecca opens her laptop and starts pulling up asset inventories. This is where things get interesting, because when you're married to someone whose family thinks money grows on networking trees, the actual sources of that money become very relevant very quickly. First category, Lexite equity. I own 63% of the company's common stock and founder shares, which at our last Series B valuation puts my stake at approximately $48 million. Sophia has no claim on business equity acquired before marriage, and our postnup specifically excludes any future dilution from additional funding rounds. Second category, my diversified investment portfolio. Real estate holdings, private equity positions, venture capital fund stakes, and what my accountant politely calls alternative investments. Basically everything from art collections to cryptocurrency positions that I accumulated during my law firm days when I was billing 300 hours a month and had more money than time to spend it. Third category, the Upper West Side penthouse. Lease is solely in my name. Down payment came from my pre-marriage savings, and monthly payments come from my family office accounts. Sophia's name appears nowhere on any relevant documentation, which was intentional. I learned from watching too many litigation cases where joint asset ownership became leverage in divorce proceedings. Fourth category, and this is where it gets really interesting. My minority stake in Whitmore Events, Margot's event planning company. During COVID, when the luxury events industry was hemorrhaging money faster than a crypto startup during a bear market, Margot came to me with what she called a bridge loan request. She needed capital to retain her core staff, maintain relationships with venues like the Grand Meridian Ballroom, and weather the pandemic until charity galas and engagement parties became socially acceptable again. I didn't give her a loan. I bought equity, 25% of Whitmore Events, with a first refusal right on any additional shares and a provision for restructuring if reputational risk jeopardizes bookings from corporate clients or high-net-worth families. Margot was so desperate for capital that she signed the agreement without reading the fine print. Specifically, the clause that defines reputational risk to include any conduct that reflects poorly on the company's brand positioning or client relationship management. She forgot that line, Rebecca notes, highlighting the relevant section. But you didn't. No, I definitely did not. When you've spent 5 years handling corporate litigation, you develop a healthy respect for contract language and an obsessive attention to liability clauses. Every agreement I sign gets reviewed by attorneys who specialize in whatever industry we're dealing with, cross-referenced with similar deals in our database, and stress-tested against worst-case scenarios. The restructuring clause is particularly elegant. If Whitmore Events faces reputational damage that could impact client relationships, I have the right to assume operational control until the issues are resolved. That includes staff management, vendor relationships, client communications, and strategic planning. Essentially, I can fire Margot from her own company if her behavior creates liability issues for our corporate clients. We should also prepare a video deposition, Ava suggests. Document the events of last night while they're fresh in your memory. Establish a timeline that supports the disparagement claims. Create a record that can be used in any future litigation. I spend 20 minutes recording a calm, time-stamped account of the engagement party, the housekeeper name tag, the withheld meal, Margot's public comments, Sophia's complicity, the witnesses present, and the immediate business consequences. No emotion, no editorial commentary, just the kind of factual record that makes judges very comfortable ruling in your favor. If this becomes litigation, I tell the camera, the facts will be boring and deadly. That's the beauty of good legal preparation. It takes all the drama out of family conflict and reduces everything to contract interpretation and damages calculation. Margot can throw all the dinner parties she wants, but she can't argue with liquidated damages clauses and asset documentation. The morning ends with a strategic planning session that feels more like a private equity due diligence meeting than a divorce preparation. We have contingency plans for every possible response, from immediate capitulation to extended litigation, with specific protocols for protecting business interests while maximizing leverage in settlement negotiations. One more thing, Ava says as she packs up her files. Your reputation in the legal tech community is actually enhanced by this. Taking a principled stand against public humiliation, especially when it costs you personally, demonstrates exactly the kind of character that investors want to see in a CEO. Sometimes the best revenge is just being professional while everyone else melts down. The Lexite board meeting convenes at 2 p.m. in our conference room, which overlooks Manhattan's financial district with the kind of view that reminds everyone why they invested in legal technology instead of cryptocurrency. Our board consists of 8 directors, 3 founders including myself, 2 Series A investors, 2 Series B leads, and 1 independent director who used to run compliance for Goldman Sachs before deciding that startup life offered more interesting challenges and better stock options. I'm wearing a different Tom Ford suit today, charcoal gray instead of navy, because apparently my subconscious has decided that yesterday's navy suit is now associated with family humiliation and needs to be dry cleaned back to emotional neutrality. The tie is Hermes, the kind of understated luxury that whispers, "I can afford to be subtle about my success," to people who understand thread counts and market capitalization. Let's address the elephant in the room, says Margaret Chen, our lead Series B investor from Meridian Capital. She's got the kind of direct communication style that comes from managing billion-dollar funds and dealing with founders who think their personal drama doesn't affect their fiduciary responsibilities. We heard about some events last night that might impact our strategic planning. I appreciate Margaret's approach. She's not asking for gossip or personal details. She's asking whether my domestic situation creates any material risks for the company's growth trajectory, investor relations, or competitive positioning. It's the kind of question that separates professional investors from amateur family members who think business is just networking with expensive accessories. Short-term turbulence, long-term clarity. I tell the board, pulling up our Q3 financial projections on the conference room's 85-inch display. Personal matters are being handled through proper legal channels with no impact on operational performance or strategic initiatives. David Park, our Series A lead from Fifth Avenue Ventures, nods approvingly. Your personal reputation management actually strengthens our investment thesis. Principled leadership under pressure is exactly what we want to see in a CEO. This is why I work with institutional investors instead of angel investors or family money. Professional VCs understand that personal integrity isn't just a character trait. It's a business asset that affects everything from client retention to employee morale to regulatory compliance. When federal investigators start looking at legal tech companies, they want to see founders who make ethical decisions even when it costs them personally. We spend 45 minutes reviewing our core business metrics, which are frankly spectacular. Monthly recurring revenue is up 37%. Quarter over quarter, client churn is down to less than 2% annually, and our AI platform is processing contracts at a rate that would make our competitors weep into their Series A pitch decks. But the real excitement comes when we discuss the distressed acquisition opportunity I've been tracking with Ronan's help. DokaFlow AI is officially in fire sale mode. I announce, pulling up their financial statements on the screen. Burn rate of $800,000 per month, runway of approximately 16 weeks, and a board of directors that's basically in full panic mode about their Series B extension falling through. DokaFlow's situation is a masterclass in what happens when you build a solid product but fail catastrophically at everything else that matters for startup success. Their document automation technology is genuinely impressive. Machine learning algorithms that can analyze legal contracts faster than most junior associates and identify compliance issues before they become litigation risks. The problem is everything else. Their go-to-market strategy was designed by people who apparently think enterprise sales happen through LinkedIn in-mail campaigns. Their pricing model assumes that mid-market law firms have unlimited budgets for legal technology upgrades. Their customer success team consists of 3 people who've never worked at a law firm and don't understand why attorneys are suspicious of AI platforms that promise to replace human judgment. Acquisition terms? Asks Robert Kim, our independent director, who's seen enough distressed buyouts to know that desperate founders make interesting negotiating partners. $12 million for full IP portfolio, customer contracts, and key engineering talent, I reply. Their technology integrates with our compliance platform within 6 months, gives us immediate access to 3 Fortune 500 clients and 2 federal agencies, and eliminates our primary competitor in the mid-market segment. It's a classic vulture capitalism play, except we're not vultures. We're competitors with better management, stronger funding, and a business model that actually generates sustainable revenue. Docaflow's failure isn't our fault, but their assets would definitely accelerate our growth trajectory and strengthen our market positioning for an eventual IPO. The board approves the acquisition unanimously, which takes approximately 8 minutes of discussion. This is what happens when your directors trust your strategic judgment and your track record of turning complex legal problems into profitable technology solutions. After the meeting, I open a bottle of Macallan 25 in my office and pour exactly 3 glasses. One for myself, one for Ronan, and one for James Morrison, our general counsel. It's the kind of whiskey that costs more per bottle than most people spend on rent, aged longer than most startups survive, and smooth enough to make hostile takeovers feel like gentlemanly negotiations. I take exactly 1 sip and then set it down. I want my head clear for the next phase of this operation. At 4 p.m., I schedule a shareholder call for Whitmore Events, using my 25% equity position to demand an emergency board meeting. The other shareholders include Margot, 51%, 2 silent partners who provided initial capital, 15% each, and a handful of vendors who accepted equity instead of cash during the COVID downturn, 9% total. The call happens over Zoom, because apparently even Margot's event planning company has embraced remote work technology, probably out of necessity after spending 2 years navigating pandemic restrictions and social distancing requirements. I'm calling this meeting to address immediate reputational risks to our client relationships. I begin, speaking directly into my laptop's camera with the same tone I used to use for depositions when opposing counsel thought they had a smoking gun, but actually just had smoke. I cite the morals clause in our shareholder agreement. Yes, even Margot's precious event planning company has one, because I insisted on it when I bought my equity position. Then I present evidence of reputational harm, screenshots from last night's social media posts, documentation of the public humiliation incident, and preliminary feedback from 3 corporate clients who are reassessing their vendor relationships after witnessing the engagement party debacle. We recommend immediate restructuring. I continue. Staff retention prioritized, vendor payments maintained, and Margot transitioned to a non-executive advisory role pending a conduct review by independent board members. Silence. Then something beautiful happens. One of the vendors thanks me. Another agrees to convert an outstanding invoice into a convertible note rather than demand immediate payment. The silent partners ask thoughtful questions about operational continuity and client relationship management. The atmosphere shifts from emotional family drama to mathematical business analysis. And math loves me. 3 days after the engagement party massacre, Bianca shows up at the Lex site lobby at 11:47 a.m., looking like she spent the past 72 hours discovering that her fiancé's career prospects are directly correlated with her brother-in-law's investment decisions. No cameras this time, no designer gown, no audience of 300 venture capitalists and their trophy spouses. Just Bianca in jeans and a Columbia Law sweatshirt, which is either a coincidence or a carefully calculated attempt to remind me that we're both attorneys who understand how contracts work. I'm ashamed, she says when I meet her in our conference room, her voice small in a way that suggests this conversation has been rehearsed, but the emotions behind it are genuine. I copied Mom's behavior because I thought money was about status, not responsibility. This is interesting. Bianca's never struck me as particularly self-aware, but maybe watching your engagement party collapse in real time while your business partners publicly distance themselves from your family creates the kind of clarity that's usually reserved for SEC investigations and federal grand jury proceedings. I pour her coffee from our ridiculously expensive espresso machine and wait for her to continue. One thing I learned from 5 years of litigation: when someone's ready to confess, you let them talk. Eventually, they'll say something that either helps your case or destroys theirs, and either outcome works in your favor. Julian's been a mess, she continues. His startup's funding fell through. Montrose Capital put him on administrative leave pending an internal review of professional conduct, and apparently 3 other portfolio companies are requesting new relationship managers. Cardanova's Series B extension didn't just fail, it imploded spectacularly, taking Julian's reputation and career prospects with it. When your own company can't secure funding because your personal life creates liability issues for investors, you've crossed the line from rising star to cautionary tale in the venture capital world. Apex Ventures dropped him as a partner, Bianca adds, and I can hear the genuine distress in her voice. They said his judgment regarding family relationships raises questions about his ability to manage fiduciary responsibilities. Translation: Julian's former partners think that anyone stupid enough to let his future mother-in-law humiliate potential investors at a public event probably shouldn't be trusted with pension fund money or university endowments. It's harsh, but fair. Venture capital is fundamentally about relationship management, and if you can't manage your own family relationships, how can LPs trust you with their capital allocation decisions? My phone buzzes with a text from Ronan. Julian called me directly. Not you, me. Wants to know if the funding pause can be negotiated. I show Bianca the message and watch her face crumble. He's calling your CFO? Not you. He burned the bridge with me when he let his future mother-in-law treat me like domestic staff. I explain. Now he's trying to negotiate through intermediaries, which suggests he understands that this is a business problem, not a family problem. Ronan's response to Julian was apparently devastating in its professional politeness. Our LP concerns relate to governance and ethics flags at the management level, not term sheet cosmetics. We recommend addressing root cause issues before pursuing additional funding conversations. Translation: fix your character problem before asking for money. Grow a spine, learn some professional boundaries, and maybe consider that your fiancé's family's behavior reflects on your judgment as a fund manager. At 2 p.m., Sophia requests a meeting. Not at home, not at some neutral restaurant, but in the conference room of Morrison, Klein & Associates, my old law firm, where both our attorneys can be present and everything gets recorded for potential future litigation. She arrives with her own legal counsel, which tells me she's finally taking this seriously as a business negotiation rather than a marital spat. She looks pale, like someone who spent 3 days discovering that her trust fund doesn't actually make her immune to consequences. It was stupid, she says, her hands folded in her lap like she's back in law school getting dressed down by a professor for failing to read the assigned cases. I laugh because I thought it was harmless. This is the closest thing to an apology I'm likely to get from someone who was raised to believe that intentions matter more than impact, that social positioning is more important than personal integrity, that family loyalty means enabling bad behavior rather than confronting it. I slide a 1-page settlement framework across the marble conference table. It's the kind of document that looks simple but contains enough legal complexity to keep both sets of attorneys billable for months if anyone decides to contest the terms. If you want partnership, I tell her, start with compliance. The framework includes couples counseling with a therapist who specializes in high-net-worth relationship dynamics, public apology letters to the Whitmore Events staff, and to me personally, a 12-month behavioral clause with specific performance metrics, strict non-disparagement provisions with liquidated damages, and temporary separation of all financial accounts pending completion of the rehabilitation program. It's not punitive, it's therapeutic, assuming Sophia actually wants to save our marriage rather than just minimize her financial exposure in a divorce. The behavioral clause includes specific metrics for respectful communication, boundary enforcement with extended family, and demonstrated commitment to our shared values rather than her mother's social hierarchy obsession. Meanwhile, I'm drafting a separate framework for Margot, because someone needs to address the root cause of this family's dysfunction before it metastasizes into additional reputational damage for everyone involved. Her path to redemption is more complex. Sell the Southampton mini estate and move into something that doesn't require a full-time maintenance staff. Allow the Whitmore Events restructuring to proceed without sabotage or interference. Complete a professional development program focused on conflict resolution and boundary management, and maintain absolute compliance with non-disparagement agreements for a minimum of 2 years. Keep dignity. I tell Ava when we're reviewing the terms. Lose the throne. It's not about revenge. It's about creating sustainable boundaries that prevent this kind of behavior from recurring. Margot can maintain her social status and financial security, but she can't maintain her habit of treating family members like employees in her personal drama production company. The settlement frameworks are designed to give everyone a face-saving exit strategy while ensuring that future family gatherings don't turn into hostile takeover scenarios. Professional mediation, clear performance expectations, financial consequences for non-compliance, and regular progress reviews conducted by neutral third parties. It's basically a corporate restructuring plan applied to family relationships, which sounds cold until you realize that treating family dynamics like business relationships might actually make them healthier and more sustainable in the long run. 3 days later, I get responses to both frameworks. Sophia's attorney indicates preliminary acceptance pending clarification of specific terms. Margot's response comes through her new legal counsel. Apparently, she's hired someone from the white-collar criminal defense bar, which suggests she finally understands the seriousness of the situation. Both are ready to negotiate, which means both finally understand that actions have consequences, even in families that think money makes them immune to accountability. 12 months later, I'm standing on the terrace of our Upper West Side penthouse, watching the Manhattan skyline light up like a portfolio dashboard showing all green numbers. It's September again, almost exactly 1 year since the Grand Meridian Ballroom incident that my therapist insists on calling the catalyst event instead of the night I systematically destroyed my in-laws' financial ecosystem. Apparently, professional counselors prefer clinical language to accurate descriptions. LexSite closed our strategic acquisition of DokaFlow AI 6 months ago, integrating their document automation technology with our compliance platform so seamlessly that our monthly recurring revenue jumped 43% in the following quarter. We also completed a clean Series C funding round, $65 million from institutional investors who appreciated our track record, our management team's integrity, and our commitment to sustainable growth rather than venture capital ego projects. Notably absent from our Series C syndicate, Montrose Capital, we chose partners who treat waitstaff like human beings and understand that character matters more than connections in the legal technology sector. Our new lead investor is Peterson Strategic Partners, a fund that specializes in enterprise software companies with strong compliance records and ethical leadership teams. Their due diligence process included personal reference checks, which would have been problematic if I had a reputation for tolerating public humiliation from family members. Tonight we're hosting a small dinner on the terrace. No crystal chandeliers, no string quartets, no name tags identifying anyone's supposed social status. Just city lights, decent wine, and people who've learned the difference between wealth and character over the past year of intensive family therapy and corporate restructuring. Helena and Richard Montrose attend as friends, not fundraisers. It turns out that watching someone handle family conflict with professional grace actually impressed them more than Julian's networking strategies ever did. Helena's wearing a simple dress instead of her usual $40,000 designer gowns, and Richard spent most of the evening asking thoughtful questions about our AI platform's compliance features rather than discussing term sheets or valuation metrics. "You handled that situation exactly right," Helena tells me over dessert. Julian learned some hard lessons about boundaries and professional judgment. It was probably the best thing that could have happened to his career, even if it didn't feel that way at the time. Julian's career did eventually recover, though it took 8 months of what venture capitalists politely call personal development and what everyone else calls learning to act like a grown-up. He's now a principal at a smaller fund that specializes in fintech startups, working under senior partners who believe that character assessment is just as important as financial modeling in investment decisions. Bianca brings her new fiancé, Omar Rahman, a compliance director at a healthcare investment fund who has the kind of calm professionalism that comes from spending your career preventing rich people from making stupid mistakes with other people's money. Omar treats servers with respect, asks genuine questions about our business, and somehow manages to make compliance sound interesting rather than tedious. He's also the kind of person who would never allow his future in-laws to humiliate family members at public events. Different energy. Bianca murmurs to me while Omar's discussing regulatory changes in healthcare AI with our general counsel. He makes me want to be better. This is what emotional growth looks like in practice. Choosing partners who elevate your character rather than enabling your worst impulses. Surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to meet higher standards rather than providing excuses for bad behavior. Ronan arrives fashionably late, carrying sparkling water instead of wine because he's on what he calls a numbers-only kick. Apparently, watching family financial drama unfold in real time convinced him that emotional decision-making is incompatible with optimal portfolio management. He's been particularly focused on our operational metrics lately, partly because our Series C investors expect quarterly reviews, and partly because he genuinely enjoys turning complex business problems into elegant mathematical solutions. Our customer acquisition cost is down 18% year-over-year, he announces, because Ronan treats social gatherings like informal board meetings. Client retention is up to 97%, and our net promoter score among mid-market law firms is higher than any competitor in the legal tech sector. This is why I hired him. He can make a hostile takeover sound like a humanitarian mission and turn family drama into data points that inform strategic decision-making. Margot arrives at 8:30, 30 minutes after everyone else, which used to be her passive-aggressive power play, but now seems like genuine consideration for other people's time. She's wearing a simple navy dress that probably cost less than her usual jewelry allowance, and she carries a handwritten note instead of arriving empty-handed with expectations that someone else will handle social obligations. Thank you for saving the company I used to call mine, the note reads. It belongs to the people who work there now. Whitmore Events survived its restructuring, mostly because removing Margot from day-to-day operations allowed the actual event planners to focus on client satisfaction rather than family politics. The company now operates as a genuine service business rather than Margot's personal social media platform, and their client retention rate has improved dramatically since implementing professional boundaries and ethical business practices. Margot volunteers twice a week at a legal aid clinic in Brooklyn, helping low-income families navigate tenant disputes and consumer protection issues. She brings coffee for the interns, says please when requesting document copies, and apparently treats everyone with the kind of basic human decency that should have been her default setting all along. The legal aid work is humbling, she admits over dinner. I spent so many years thinking success meant being served that I forgot how good it feels to serve others. Personal growth is possible at any age, assuming you're willing to acknowledge that wealth doesn't exempt you from basic human decency and social responsibility. Sophia and I are not the same couple we were a year ago. We didn't pretend the ballroom incident never happened or sweep it under expensive rugs purchased with family money. We built policies around it, the same way corporations develop compliance protocols after regulatory violations. If love is going to survive, it must pass governance standards. Some nights we talk like startup founders at a whiteboard. What are our shared values? What's our risk profile as a partnership? Where do we want to invest our attention equity? How do we prevent family dysfunction from becoming operational risks? It sounds clinical, but it works. Marriage contracts and business partnerships both require clear expectations, regular performance reviews, and consequences for non-compliance with agreed-upon standards. I pour exactly half a finger of Macallan 25-year-old whiskey and set it on the terrace table. Then I leave it untouched, because tonight I don't need liquid courage or artificial confidence. I need clarity. And clarity comes from knowing which battles are worth fighting and which victories are worth celebrating. Under the September wind, I remember the name badge that called me housekeeper. It was designed to make me smaller, to put me in my place, to remind me that family hierarchy matters more than personal achievement or professional success. Instead, I cleaned house, contracts, capital, corporate governance, and family boundaries. When I finally look up at the Manhattan skyline, I feel the quiet power of a man who knows which levers are his to control and which rooms he will never enter again without his own name on the door.